just as a little bit of warning slash context, I have seen no live streams. I have viewed no additional content in reference to season 8 from any Game of Thrones provider since the season started. I have kept it completely free from outside influences. What you're hearing now, it's all going to be me and my personal thoughts and theories on everything. So at this point, it's been half a week since seeing the season finale of Game of Thrones, and I have on the periphery heard of some of the fervor that is going on and so forth, and I want to kind of share my thoughts on the whole thing, my perspective on season 8, my perspective on the series, and we'll go from there. Now, I have not gone into depth at all as to what are the specific beefs of people when they talk about the series ending. As I said, I stayed away from it. I'm not even really interested as to what their problems were. I personally liked what they did. There's when it comes to Game of Thrones, this was a really happy ending, which was in all reality kind of strange. I mean, yes, one of the principal characters from the entire series who appeared in episode 1 was, betrayed and murdered, you know, right at the end. But, quite honestly, anybody who hasn't seen this coming for the last 2 seasons, well,
You haven't been paying attention.
there are several things about Daenerys that kind of factor into her death. One, she is a foreigner in a foreign land, despite her Westerosi background and heritage. She born and raised in a foreign land. She is still essentially a foreigner with a foreign army. So it's not like that was ever really going to work. The second thing is that she suffers from the intensity that all Targaryens really suffer from. Her fate is really no different from Aegon the Fifth, Egg from the Dunk and Egg novellas. He he became so super focused on his goal that he went off the deep end. And if my personal thoughts on Summer Hall are in any way true, that he really went off the deep end, possibly was wanting to do human sacrifice, and then finally snapped out into his senses at the last moment and basically allowed himself to die. He had gone way too far because of his intensity. That's exactly what happened to Dany. She was so focused on her goal that nothing else mattered. No logistics, not the fact that they didn't want to be liberated, not the fact that their local governance could be perfectly benign and help them along, but no, somebody's over them, so therefore they have to be liberated. That whole mindset, very Targaryen, and so blatantly wrong. And by kind of a juxtaposition, or not a juxtaposition, kind of in addition to that, what is said about all villains, they are the hero of their own story. She definitely sees herself as the hero, but everybody else definitely sees her as the villain. So the fact that it was necessary for the safety and stability of all of Westeros for her to die, I have no problem. I have zero problem the fact that she was killed. And that Jon did it also does not surprise me. Jon will always do what was right, and what he did was right. You know, think of all of think of the tyrants of our own world. If somebody had been trying to get to them and then had basically had the courage in order to put them down by whatever means is necessary and change history. There is the question that you have to ask yourself, and it's the question of Jaime Lannister. Do you keep with your vows? Do you keep with your with the chain of command and the chain of authority, or do you do what's right and stop a tyrant and stop a mass murderer? The choice of Jon is the choice of Jaime Lannister, and we cannot condemn one and give the other a pass. Both of them were right for what they did. Now, there's also a lot of other modern politics that can be woven, that can be, compared to the Dany story, but I am not going to be touching those at all. That is a can of worms I refuse to open. And I can almost guarantee there are some grumblings when it comes to Bran. Bran the Broken becoming the new king of the Six Kingdoms of Westeros. I I did not mention this in the first impressions, although I did write it down. As soon as Tyrion started suggesting Bran, it immediately came to mind. There's our third big surprise. George R.R. Martin said there are going to be three shockers of a surprise in this story. One of them was the death of Princess Shireen Baratheon. The second one was going to be the reveal of the origin and the background of Hodor, and the crowning of Bran the Broken. That's going to be number three. I've watched lots of content providers, from Jacob Preston, Gray Area, no, not so much Gray Area, Smokescreen, Order of the Green Hand, um, uh, Lucifer Means Lightbringer, In Deep Geek, Secrets of the Citadel, and I don't think. Now, I may have missed some episodes, and feel free to actually point out and put a link in the comments below, because I would be interested. I don't think anybody was seeing Bran as the actual king, so to me this came in quite out of left field. But as soon as it started being mentioned, I saw it coming, albeit 5 seconds before it hit. But it also does not really surprise me, which I can imagine but I can imagine it took other people by surprise. As soon as it was mentioned, it seemed, well, there it is. There's the third big surprise, and almost, what are we talking about here? Now, when it comes to the Army of the Dead and the Night King, I can honestly say that I'm a bit disappointed in. Maybe because, like so many others, I am so used to, a lot of nuance, even a little bit of characterization, a little bit of get to know you time with various characters. The Night King, in fiction, and I'm sure there are people, I may get the terminology wrong here, but the Night King was a force of nature villain. He was elemental. Yes, he was an elemental ice, but he was almost purely elemental in his drive. He moved forward. There was no negotiation. There was no interaction. He was doing stuff that, would steamroll the continent. And these kinds of villains are called force of nature villains. Another good example of this is Sauron out of Lord of the Rings, which, considering George even admitted he took a lot of inspiration from Lord of the Rings, it makes a great deal of sense. But when it comes to the movies and even the book, I still got more interaction. I knew more about Sauron and had a better grasp of character than I did the Night King. Now, grant, with Lord of the Rings, you have the prequels, which are the prequel, the prologue, I should say, wrong term, the prologue information that you get for the movies. Okay, so we get to see Sauron. We get to see how powerful and destructive he was. Awesome. That information comes out in the books in the Council of Elrond, which I believe is a 30-page chapter. I don't have my copy handy, so I can't actually tell you how long it is. Otherwise, I'd just simply look it up. Um, there was not that, and there and with the additional publications of the Untold Tales, the Unfinished Tales, and specifically the Silmarillion, that described what Sauron did under his former master, what he did during the Second Age, how he destroyed or caused the destruction of Numenor. You had a good amount of, albeit second or third hand interaction with this particular character. You had a pretty good grasp on what he was about, and exactly what he wanted. That's not true with the Night King. All we saw him was just him looking at stuff with absolutely not a single expression on his face. I mean, he didn't even show any kind of expression when he was falling off Rhaego, or sorry, Viserion, wrong dragon, into the storm. You look at that face, it was complete stone. He might as well have been a mannequin. It's almost like I don't even know why they bothered putting a guy into that prosthetic. They teased us with that one scene where you see the children of the forest making him, and that was all you got. That is the extent of the background. So there was no connection really there at all, and in the show it was just to me very hollow and very empty, very unsatisfying. I had no particular satisfaction at his death other than good. Finally, this ridiculously long battle is over. But that was an editing issue that I pointed out at the time, that the battle went on too long. There should have been more in the way of breaking it up. And there were several things that could have been done beyond just going to the crypts. But that is another subject. My other really big beef, or I'm going to say beef is probably too strong of a term. My other real issue with this particular season is some of the characters seemed almost caricatures of themselves. They were boiled down so much. They were portrayed in such a boiled down and distilled manner that it was almost on the verge of caricature. Sansa was a bit like that. Arya was like that. Dany was, really all of the female characters were like that, which is kind of disappointing. And then we got, I guess you could say, my thoughts on the season as a whole. Just as a quick overview of the episodes, I found the first one. I found episode 1 rather meh. It was okay. It was establishing, take it or leave it. Then there was episode 2, which was really good. Really good at ratcheting up the tension. Got the good connections between characters before a lot of them were gonna die. Episode 3 was good up until near the end. At which point, as I mentioned in my first impressions, it became like this Agent Smith fight from Matrix 2. It went on too long. Literally, at the last 5 minutes, I was just like, okay, let's just get this over with. Which I love medieval and fantasy combat. It is like it is one of my, seeing it done well is one of my great joys, and I was going, let's just end this. Let's get this over with. Episode 4 was kind of the deep breath before going back underwater again. So there was nothing that really popped or particularly, wowed me about that particular episode. Episode 5 was I did not like episode 5 really at all, because it was just at that point it was just the two petty egos of two. I can't even say it because I don't want to get flagged by YouTube. Um, but I think you can figure out what I'm talking about. There was no satisfaction there. There was no, you know moments that would have been fantastic, like Clegane Bowl. Clegane Bowl was good, but it kind of ended on a hollow note. The death of Cersei, which I had been now looking forward to for 5 seasons. Um, no, let me rephrase that. Probably since season 1, really just rung hollow. It was like, and it was very unsatisfying. Um, and then there's episode 6, which, as I said before, was ended. They ended it as well as they could have with what they had to work with. Um, so I have no particular beef with it. As a self-contained piece, I think that season 8, it had its highs and lows. Every season does. There are those episodes that we absolutely, watch once and cannot watch again. Um, I'm thinking specifically Hold the Door. I always skip the end part of that episode. Hard Home, I skip the end of that episode. Um, the Red Wedding, I skip the end of that episode. The marriage of Sansa to Ramsay Bolton Snow, I skip that particular part. There are those parts that I will watch again and again and again. Battle of the Bastards, The Mountain and the Viper. I'll watch the front half of the Battle for Winterfell multiple times. I enjoyed it until it starts just becoming too much. So as a whole, ups, downs. It told the story it needed to tell. You know, the and really the um, to sum up season 8, I have to describe it like an open world video game. Something like from Assassin's Creed or Witcher or Dishonored or any of these other games that have, here's your or Fallout 3, Fallout 4, where they give you a big open world and say go, and give you a bunch of quests. So using that analogy, the various storylines where some of the quests that build in towards the main, and this last season and especially the last episode was that linear track at the very end. Where it there's no open world feeling, where it's more confined. And that's probably, the best way of describing it. So, you know, I don't know about anybody else who's listening, but I really enjoy the open world aspect. lots of great spaces, a lot of places to go, lots of foes to face, all that kind of thing. And then you have the very linear um, ends, even if it's modified by choices. Um, it's still pretty linear, and you don't have as much freedom for movement. Um, but by that point, you're ready to end. You're ready to have the resolve, but you don't have the wiggle room that you had before. And to me, that's what season 8 and episode 6 in particularly felt like. It felt like the linear course at the end of the game. Now, as a whole, when it comes to all 8 seasons of Game of Thrones, I think I'm in the majority, or I'm with the majority of people that say seasons 1 through 5 absolutely fantastic, because at that point we had the source material that they were working off of. Yeah, there were characters that were taken out or combined in with other individuals. It is a little disappointing about the Dorne plot line, but you know what? That was where the scope of the books was way beyond the really what the scope of the show could be. There are things that have to be cut. Season 6, you know, the best cliffhanger of all. Jon Snow is dead. Um, Season 6 to me was quite solid. Season 7 started off good, but I'll be honest that, the Ice Lake and Beyond the Wall episode was, in terms of travel time, not in terms of the trap. The trap made really good sense. Uh, but the travel times were fudged to the point of really straining credulity and believability and immersion. Um, and then, rolling into season 8, the showrunners had uh, only had the barest of outlines of where George was going, and presented us material as best they could. Um, I still like Game of Thrones. I'll still watch it from back to back, and enjoy it. So that's really what matters. So to come back to the central subject of the video, season or episode 6, I liked it. Season 8 overall, I liked it. It was solid. I pretty much liked it. The series, I loved it. I'll take the diamonds and the rough, and enjoy the whole as a piece. So that's all I've got for this time. Give me if you liked what I do, give me a like, a share, and subscribe down below. If you also let me know what you thought of my sum up, what you agreed about, what you agreed with, what you disagreed with. Put it in the comments below. I'm not particularly offended if somebody wants to rip my reasonings to shred. Please give me your argument. I'd be interested to see it. So that's all I've got for this time. I do have some further stuff that I want to be working on for presentations. So if you're subscribed, hit the notifications bell so you know when I drop another video. And I will see you in the next one.